is NBC Connecticut News at 11.
We're following breaking news. That was an earthquake that you may have felt just minutes ago. 4.8 in New Jersey near Mount Olive. Late-breaking details next about what was felt here in Connecticut. After the rain, snow, sleet, and strong winds, check out the conditions right now in Waterbury. Some sunshine, then cloudy and cool today. Storm tracker meteorologist Bob Maxon has your details next. And the Final Four showdown tonight. Two of the best women's basketball players square off. Paige Beckers in UConn, Caitlin Clark in Iowa tonight. We're breaking down the big matchup. Good morning. Thanks for joining us here on this Friday. I'm Kevin Nathan. We start with that major breaking news. That was, in fact, an earthquake you may have felt at about 10:23 this morning. So here's what we know so far. The 4.8 quake happened in New Jersey at, according to the USGS, White House Station, New Jersey. Again, a little before 10:30, and that town is about 70 miles outside of New York City, but it was felt in the city and here in Connecticut. Just minutes ago, we were updated and inundated with phone calls and emails asking what was happening. Again, that quake in White House Station, New Jersey. Right now, we want to get over to Storm Tracker meteorologist Bob Maxon here with more on this earthquake. Bob.
Yeah, we'll get you the locator on this. As you saw on the map there, it's out here in kind of, what'd you call it, at north central, northwestern parts of New Jersey. There's at 70 miles outside of the city, and about 120 miles away from Hartford. So the reports of a 4.8 magnitude, a depth of 3 miles, so fairly shallow as far as earthquakes go. And I think that's why it was felt so strongly in Connecticut. My phone absolutely lit up. I was concerned about family because I got so many text messages and so quickly. From New York City to Danbury, Simsbury, all across Connecticut, reports of somewhat violent shaking. And obviously, that's not something we're accustomed to here. It happens incredibly infrequently. We get these little, ice quakes once in a while with the moodest noises. But a 4.8 in New Jersey, relatively shallow at 3 miles, and the time, as Kevin mentioned, right at 10:22. Or 10:23 in the morning. So there's Mount Olive, White House Station, Stanhope, a really beautiful area. They call that the horse country of New Jersey out here, far away from all the urban centers, and just remarkable. And no reports of damage yet, but it happened half an hour ago. So I've been texting with some family in that area to see if they've had any reports of damage. About 120 miles away from, let's say, New Britain, Connecticut, to this area in New Jersey where that was, where the epicenter was, from the USGS and the Weston Laboratory. In fact, look at the seismograph, which I think I have queued up here. Yeah, this is the seismograph from the Weston Observatory up at Boston College. I know that always seems strange to me. How are they getting, well, they have seismographs all over the place, but this is where the reports come from. Nothing going on, quiet morning, everything seems normal, and all of a sudden, there you see the seismograph reading, and right there at 10:23 in the morning, and it was shook for a couple of minutes, and then we're back to somewhat normalcy. But again, 3 miles in depth, about a 4.8 magnitude from the USGS, the Geological Survey, and that's backed up here by the folks at the Western Laboratory. So, Kevin, a very rare occurrence, and that's why I think everybody was caught off guard and startled by this earthquake felt throughout Connecticut.
Bob, I want to stick with you for a second. We're going to we're efforting a Quinnipiac professor to talk more about this. This is a major breaking story for just joining us. A 4.8 magnitude earthquake felt here in Connecticut, centered in White House Station, New Jersey. Bob, my daughter texted me. She's at Susquehanna University, 250 miles west of here, to give you a sense of the size and scope. I got a lot of texts from college friends in Philly who said they could feel a building shake where they are. Do we have to be concerned here about aftershocks with an earthquake? And give us a sense of what 4.8 means in the context of bigger earthquakes, smaller earthquakes.
Think about the pictures that came out of Taiwan. Right. Earlier this week, it was a 7.1, I believe, or a major hurricane.
Right.
The difference between a 4.8 and a 7 is a world of difference. Okay. I mean, several different magnitudes. So you saw the extensive damage that happened in Taiwan earlier this week. Think about some of the earthquakes we've seen in the San Francisco Bay Area going back to the World Series. Those are big earthquakes. This is still, I think, in the whole scheme of things, a minor earthquake, but because it was shallow, so it was felt in such a wide radius, which really was impressive. Kevin, my daughter in New York City, I think earthquakes in New York City and my eyes pop out, right? Folks across all of Connecticut felt this. I'm not sure about aftershocks, but aftershocks are rarely, if ever, stronger than the actual earthquake itself. So if there were some shocks, it would be some minor shaking, I would think. But that's something that we can let a geologist really dive into, folks that spend their lives researching and studying earthquakes. But for now, it seems like we're okay. I'm going to be very interested to see, though, what transpires out in New Jersey, closer to the epicenter, whether or not there's any damage to infrastructure there, homes, buildings, businesses, industry out in that part of New Jersey. So that'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. But you could certainly feel some minor tremors here as aftershocks, but we'll have to see how that kind of develops over the next several hours, Kevin.
All right, Bob, and we'll get back to you. Bob Maxon reporting on this 4.8 magnitude earthquake centered in White House Station, New Jersey, felt here in Connecticut. We've been inundated with calls this morning. It's all people are talking about right now. Let's get out to Ari Perez. He's an associate professor of civil engineering at Quinnipiac University. Ari, thanks for your time. Give us a sense of the size and scope of this earthquake. And it only happened about 40 minutes ago at about 10:23, and what you make of what occurred here in the Northeast this morning.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me. Well, I think, as you were mentioning, any earthquake in Connecticut is something that is a little bit out of the usual, and so it's normal that folks are a little bit worried. I agree completely with what you said. This is very different than the earthquake in Taiwan. When you think of the ratings on the Richter scale, it doesn't go up linearly. It actually goes up exponentially. So a magnitude 6 earthquake is actually 10 times worse than a magnitude 5, which would then make a magnitude 7 100 times worse than a magnitude 5. And so even though a 4.8 is, something that is clearly able to be felt even at a long distance, it is not surprising to me that there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of damage yet, hopefully.
Typically, Professor, with a 4.8 magnitude earthquake, what would be the scope of that? Again, it seems to me, from what we're gathering so far, it's going 100 plus miles out from wherever it's centered. Is that typically what we would expect from a 4.8 magnitude earthquake?
So it really depends. When you have an earthquake, what happens typically, right, and this is just a very simple explanation, is that you get two plates that are kind of locked in, and all of a sudden there's a break that happens, and so there's very sudden movement. You can think of it kind of like a rubber band snapping. And so part of what makes the effects of the earthquake change is how taut that rubber band was, right? Like the more it was tension before it broke, the longer the force that will happen. But you also have to worry about the material through which the wave is propagating. That is to say, if you toss a rock in water, you will get those waves and those ripples propagate out because the water allows that. But you can't really see that much of it in sand. You can see a little bit, but not as much. And so when you study the earthquakes, you worry about, of course, the magnitude of the earthquake itself, but even the material in which it propagates. And that's what will actually make the conditions felt at the surface. In here, I think because it's shallow and because we have pretty homogeneous material, we don't have a whole lot of fractures and a whole lot of places where the energy of the wave can get lost. You can feel it at a long spread around. Sometimes you are in sections that are like a little bit broken up, and anytime you have a junction or a change in material, those effects will be dampened, just like the dampener you have at the top of your door that helps it close slowly. That can have an effect too on the earthquake wave, things like that.
Great information. Stay with us, Professor. For folks just joining us, we're following breaking news right now. At about 10:23 this morning in White House Station, New Jersey, there was a 4.8 magnitude earthquake felt by so many of you right here in Connecticut. We're joined by Ari Perez. He's an associate professor of civil engineering at Quinnipiac University. Professor, if you could please give us a sense of the history of earthquakes in the Northeast and New England, the fault lines that we may have underneath us that, frankly, I'm not that aware of because this is such an infrequent event.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. Certainly, Connecticut is not a state that I would think of as very seismically active. Depending on the geology and the plate tectonics of the place where you live, you might have a lot more earthquake activity. I'm originally from Honduras, and we get quite a bit of earthquakes there. And then I did my graduate studies in South Carolina, which is the most seismically active state on the East Coast. But in Connecticut, you don't really see it because we don't have the geological conditions. That doesn't mean that it cannot happen at all. It just means that it is much rarer. It is certainly not something that we think a whole lot about. Unlike in California, where you have very strict seismic design codes in order to combat this, because seismic threat is ever present, and also South Carolina, which, we all think of the largest earthquakes happening on the West Coast, but the Charleston earthquake of 1896 was actually really, really large, one of the biggest earthquakes in the United States history. Again, in the Northeast, it's not something that we have a whole lot of thought about, outside of very dedicated circles, because it's not as big of a threat.
Professor, before we let you go, we seem to be able to predict so many things with our weather patterns, right? Through all the technology that's advanced here in the last 15, 20 years. Can we predict earthquakes? And if we can't, why not?
So we cannot, because we just don't have the level of data and understanding that is happening at those depths to accurately predict them. Again, think of like as a rubber band, right? Like the more you stretch it, the more you can figure out, oh, we're getting close to it snapping, we're getting close to it. But understanding exactly the moment where it will snap is not something that you can really do. And so we have a good sense of when earthquakes might happen. Again, like the more you pull on that rubber band, the more stress builds up underground. At some point, it has to be released. And if you look at some of the popular culture, we are expecting a big one in San Francisco because it's Tom for it. But, a big one in its time, I'm putting them in scare quotes because those are not very technical words. We don't really know. We can't forecast it like we can the eclipse that we know will happen exactly Monday afternoon. We can get a sense of when the pressures might be building up, just like we can in a volcano, right? Of like, hey, this hasn't happened for a while. There's likely stuff building up that might come out. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a very, very short heads up for the earthquake itself. And that heads up would actually just be the very beginning of it, where very sensitive instruments might be able to catch on to little tiny tremors before people do. But you're talking about minutes here, usually, in terms of a heads up.
All right, a tutorial in civil engineering this morning from Quinnipiac Associate Professor Ari Perez. Professor, if possible, if you could stay on with us, we're going to switch gears here momentarily, but we appreciate your expertise and your time this morning on short notice. Let's go now to the mayor of New Milford, Pete Bass, who joins us on the phone. Mayor, thanks for your time this morning. I know we've been flooded with calls this morning from people who felt the earthquake in their respective towns and cities across Connecticut. Again, it was centered in White House Station, New Jersey at about 10:23 this morning, 4.8 according to the USGS. Mayor, share, if you could please, what was felt in New Milford and any potential damage where you are.
Well, first, thank you for having me on the show today. Happy Friday to everybody. I actually felt it here at Town Hall. We've checked our town facilities and buildings, spoke to our first responders, and our DPW crews was very fortunate. We don't seem to have any structural damage at all up here, but it was severely felt up here, and I can testify to that right here at Town Hall. You could feel the earthquake kind of rolling through Town Hall in a way.
Mayor, if you could please, how long did the earthquake last, to your best recollection?
I would say probably anywhere from 45, 50 seconds to maybe a minute and a half.
Stay with us, Mayor. Just want to update this story because, again, this is breaking news we're following this morning. White House Station, New Jersey, is where this 4.8 magnitude earthquake was centered this morning at 10:23. We want to get back to the mayor there of New Milford, but from NBC News, the FAA has put ground stops into effect at Newark and JFK airports as a result of the earthquake. Mayor Bass, again in New Milford, what is being done in the way of perhaps letting kids out of school? I had heard something, because it's been a bit crazy here in the newsroom over the last 45 minutes or so, about some schools dismissing early. Was that given any thought in New Milford? Has that been done? What are you hearing about other surrounding towns in Connecticut?
So the other surrounding towns, I believe they're going to be doing the same thing we've been doing, is assessing if there was any damage at all, if any. I know the Superintendent Parlato would be looking, she would be the one making the decision for an early closure of the schools, if at all. And right now it's just basically assessing. We've been very fortunate so far from what we've been hearing that, there was the aftershocks of that earthquake in New Jersey rolling through New Milford, but so far we seem to be okay, which is great news.
New Milford Mayor Pete Bass, thanks for joining us on short notice. Be safe. We appreciate your time
Great.
this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Meantime, down the road from New Milford, a crew of ours in New Haven talked to a man who felt the earthquake while at his office. This is what he had to say.
So I was just getting off a video call, and I hung up the phone, and the whole office just shifted left and right for about 3 seconds. My computer monitor started shaking, and then I was kind of confused. Looked up, saw the lights in the building shaking, and I figured it was probably an earthquake.
And that's someone who felt it in New Haven. So many of you felt it. We were, again, inundated with calls this morning. I texted my wife, who teaches in Glastonbury. She didn't feel it. So it could be just depending on where you are and maybe the structure that you're in, depending how you felt this earthquake. Again, centered in White House Station, New Jersey, 4.8 magnitude, hit at about 10:23 this morning. Let's get more now on this earthquake from Storm Tracker meteorologist Bob Maxon. Bob?
Yeah, Ryan and I were just chatting, and you may remember back in 2011, there was a 5.8, so a whole magnitude higher, centered near Virginia. And you may remember that the Washington Monument was damaged by a 5.8. This is 10 times weaker. Right, so we're going to certainly hear reports of some damage in this part of New Jersey. But I also just got a note from one of my weather watchers out in Sterling. Out in Sterling, Connecticut, where they felt it. So this had a wide-ranging effect again. And now 3 miles deep seems deep to me, but in the scope of the Earth, it's considered pretty shallow. So I think that's why these waves were felt so far away from the center. And the epicenter is somewhere, one of these two, 4.8, 3 miles in depth, 10:23 a.m. This is Interstate 80. If you've been to New Jersey, it's a beautiful part of the state, north of I-78, south of I-80 near Lake Hopatcong and Necon, New Jersey. It goes south on like 202 and 206 into this region around Mount Olive and Chester, and this is where the center. I'm trying to text some family that live right there near I-80 to find out if they're getting reports of any damage or if they're hearing sirens or anything like that. But so far, we have yet to hear anything like that, which is good news. And again, the center of this earthquake about 120 miles south and southwest of, say, New Britain and the Hartford area. So 120 miles away, yet we felt it quite violently, because I think we're not accustomed to it. But my daughter in New York City, she's in her apartment in Brooklyn, and she said it was crazy. She was scared when she texted me. She goes, "What is happening?" Because, she's kind of a new resident of New York City. It's very nerve-wracking for everybody. So we felt the shake all across Connecticut, all across the Northeast. Kevin mentioned out here in Pennsylvania, of course, it was felt, and I'm sure down through Philly, New York, and very interesting setup. We don't see this often, but there's no doubt it happened. Again, a 4.7, 4.8 magnitude from the USGS, and this is the Weston Laboratory seismograph, and you can see how it happened abruptly, and now we've gone back to somewhat normalcy. Kevin, back to you.
Bob, thank you. Our colleague, NBC Connecticut political reporter Mike Savino joins us live now at the state capitol, and it sounds like they felt it there, Mike, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. To your point, Kevin, about it really depends on where you are. We were in West Hartford at the time. We didn't feel it, but here just a short distance away at the Capitol and Legislative Office building in Hartford, they did feel it. It's a quiet day, but there are people here. I have somebody who was here working. I guess to start off, tell us who you are.
Hi, I'm Jillian Morrow. I work up in House Republicans' office on the 4th floor here in the building.
And tell us what you felt.
So it started out as just kind of like our monitor shaking, and so we thought, oh, there was someone working in the suite upstairs, so we thought, oh, construction work, but then they stopped and the shaking didn't.
Right, for people, there's a lot of renovations going on, but at some point you realize that's not what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So desks were rattling, and so then we started asking around, did anyone else feel that? Is it just us?
At what point do you start to think it might be an earthquake? Obviously, we don't get those very often here.
Yeah, the text started flying around from people all over the region, the tri-state. We all have friends around, and everyone's like, did you feel that? Did you feel that? So then we figured, oh, must be something else besides just construction work.
How much shaking was there? Describe to me sort of just how violent it was.
It was pretty minimal. I mean, desk chairs were kind of rattling. You could definitely feel a little bit of shaking, but it wasn't anything to really be concerned about.
And what's the reaction in the office after the shaking, after you realize there's an earthquake? I mean, I've certainly seen plenty of people going around here trading stories about what they felt. What was the vibe in the office?
Yeah, we were all kind of talking about it. It's not something we experience very often or at all here in Connecticut, so something to talk about for the rest of the day.
And what kind of, we've also been hearing just from our own staff reports of, trying to communicate home. I mean, what kind of communication have you been having with everybody else?
Yeah, definitely a lot of text messages. Everyone checking in to see, have things fallen off the walls, everyone's safe. It's just a lot of checking in.
And certainly there's this building, there's a lot of crazy things going on in this building for other reasons, but sort of put this in perspective to have an earthquake as opposed to maybe just sort of the typical business that we see here.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something to talk about and not something we experience a lot. So, people were kind of starting to talk about what precautions are in place. Should we be evacuating? Should we go anywhere? But it all ended pretty quickly, so none of that had to happen.
And then business as usual, and now you're on TV.
Absolutely, yeah, taking a little break from my workday.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Kevin, it certainly has returned to business as normal. Just while we were waiting to come to you, a group of students came walking by, so they are letting people back in the Capitol. The Judiciary Committee is having a meeting. They're back to their meeting, voting on some bills. So certainly a disruption, but already back to business as usual up here at the Capitol in the Legislative Office Building. Back to you, Kevin.
Mike Savino, our political reporter, live at the Capitol. Mike, thank you. Back to business as usual at the Capitol. Not sure about New Jersey, the epicenter of this earthquake. If you're just joining us, White House Station, New Jersey, is where it was centered at about 10:23 this morning, 4.8. And that woman mentioned this is something to talk about, like we didn't have enough with 2 UConn basketball teams in the Final Four and a total eclipse, solar eclipse coming on Monday. Let's get out to our colleague, NBC Connecticut's Amanda Pitt. She joins us live now in Southington. Amanda, we've been talking here for the last 20 minutes or so how it depends where you were in the state as to whether or not you felt this. What's the sentiment in Southington?
Yeah, well, Kevin, we're hearing from people all over the state, really, who felt that 4.8 earthquake in New Jersey. I was in Hartford. I didn't even feel it. But you know who felt it? The Shields family here in Southington. You gave us a call when you felt it. Mom Cherie, tell me what you felt.
It felt like an earthquake. I spent a lot of time in California, so I know exactly what they feel like. And my kids were upstairs. My husband was downstairs, actually. And my phone was shaking. My couch was shaking. It was like, wow, this is an earthquake. And with the Taiwan earthquake just recently, I knew immediately what it was.
So you felt something like this before you knew immediately that it was an earthquake?
Immediately it was an earthquake. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was okay. My little one here was still in bed because she's homeschooled. But she thought that her dad was trying to wake her. And it was really crazy.
Olivia, what did you feel?
I felt my bed moving, and I felt like my dad was trying to wake me up, so I felt like he was trying to shake the bed. But when I actually woke up, no one was there.
And were you like, Dad, it's too early, I need to stay in bed?
No, I was just quiet. I was beginning to open my eyes.
So when you found out it was an earthquake, what went through your mind?
I was surprised and confused because this is my first time ever experiencing that.
Now, your dad has felt an earthquake before. Tell me, Lewis, what you felt, 15 years ago in Springfield?
Yeah, roughly. The entire room was shaking. It was pretty scary. I was in the basement getting a little work done, and the entire room just started vibrating. It was pretty scary. It was pretty scary.
That was 2008 in Springfield. Bring me back to that day for you.
I believe so. I was in my apartment. I was going to American International College, and I was studying, and the entire room started shaking. I ran out of the building, and everyone stayed outside for a few hours. Everyone was kind of scared after the building started moving.
This morning, what were you doing, and what went through your mind when you felt it again?
I was making phone calls, and just fear. Fear. I was a little afraid, but it wasn't too bad because I've been through it before.
Yeah. Now, you, Cherie, living in California, how many of these have you felt?
I felt at least 6 or 7, I would say. The worst being, I would think, would be in 1998. I was on my way to work, and it felt like I had a flat tire, basically. So by the time I got into the building, everyone's like, "Oh yeah, that was an earthquake. It was a pretty significant one." But in California, they're so common. Sometimes there's damage as long as there's not like a huge one. But I felt so many, so I knew exactly what it was.
Where did this one this morning fall on the scale of all the ones you've experienced?
I would say out of the 6 or 7. Probably like a 3. Like it felt significant. Like the house was moving. Like my couch was moving. My phone was shaking. So it was big. It was significant. And like Olivia said, she thought her dad was trying to wake her up. Just my bed was shaking. I'm like, ah. But no, it was something else. So I'm glad. Hopefully, everyone is okay. I'm hoping that there's not a lot of damage and everyone's okay. Hopefully things are good. But yeah, it was significant.
And your first thought was to call us. We appreciate it.
You got it. I want to make sure you guys knew in the Northeast, like, hey, know your earthquakes. I know mine, so.
Awesome. Thank you, Shields family. We appreciate it. Kevin, I'll send it back to you.
She sure does know her earthquakes. Amanda Pitts live for us in Southington. Somebody else knows his earthquakes. He's an associate professor of civil engineering at Quinnipiac University. Ari Perez joins us again. Professor, how rare is it to get a 4.8 magnitude earthquake in the Northeast? This one centered in White House Station, New Jersey. When was the last time we saw something like this?
Oh, I'll be honest. I don't know when the last time is. I know I've only been in the area for 10 years and I haven't had a chance to look into the history. I can certainly tell you that East Coast earthquakes, tend to be a little bit more rare than the West Coast just based on the geology of the region.
And someone may be concerned now, what's going on? Are we going to be seeing more earthquakes more frequently? What can you say about this? Is this an anomaly or could this be part of a larger pattern?
Well, with the caveat that I can't really see the future, I would imagine that this is an anomaly. Like typically the incidence or the recurrence of earthquakes is really highly tied to the geology of the region. And that doesn't really change, at least not on the time scale that humans are accustomed to. And so I would not imagine that we are in for larger earthquakes in the future more often. I know somebody mentioned aftershocks, and that can still happen. And again, if you think of the typical cause of earthquake, which is two plates readjusting to each other, there might still be like a little bit of give and take, and that's what aftershocks usually are. And so those might be felt, but I would imagine that it will be a long while before we get another earthquake that we feel this much.
Professor, thank you. Bringing me back to plate tectonics and freshman geology in college in 1986. Ari Perez, professor from Quinnipiac, we appreciate your expertise this morning. So here's what we know. The 4.8 quake happened in New Jersey, about 70 miles outside of New York City, but it was felt in the city and here in Connecticut. The quake in White House Station, New Jersey. The FAA has put ground stops into effect at Newark and JFK airports due to the earthquake. Let's get over to Bob now for a final check.
You took rocks for jocks. That's what you did. That's what they called it back. Okay, here's the latest on the earthquake, of course, the 4.7, 4.8, some conflicting information from the U.S. Geological Survey. Centered south of Interstate 80 in this area south of Mount Olive around, we're calling it White House Junction. So the 4.8 felt back here in Connecticut all over the place. I was thinking as I was listening to the professor, you may want to just go out and check out your property, check out your home. Make sure there's no smell of gas if you have gas or anything like that. Just make sure everything's structurally sound, especially in western Connecticut where you're a little bit closer to the epicenter. Kevin?
Bob, thanks. And I know we had promised the showdown preview. Caitlin Clark, Paige Beckers, UConn, Iowa. All that will be coming up today on the news at 4. And stay with NBC Connecticut as we continue to follow this major breaking news on the earthquake. We'll get you more details on the quake that rocked the state as they come into the newsroom on air and online and at NBCConnecticut.com. We'll see you back here today at 4. Big day, big weekend for news and sports and weather. We'll see you at 4.